Hey, Bitcoin standard bearers. I am Patrick, your Bitcoin motorist, and today I wanted to mention something about the staggering genius of Satoshi Nakamoto, the anonymous, mysterious creator or creators of Bitcoin. And I think that the prescience of Satoshi is something to talk about, and understanding some of the things that Satoshi did, or more importantly, some of the things that Satoshi didn't do. Understanding these things can help you to understand what makes Bitcoin different from all the shitcoins. What sets Bitcoin apart from any other cryptocurrency, and how no other cryptocurrency can ever match Bitcoin and Bitcoin's launch. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is the Genesis block. So we just had our 10th birthday in Bitcoin back on January 3rd. So the first block that was mined in Bitcoin was January 3rd of 2009. When Satoshi mined that very first block, he had encoded a backwards message in the Coinbase, and that backwards message read the Times 03 Jan 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. So this was a headline in the Times newspaper dated January 3rd, 2009. And the headline said, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Now, let me tell you the genius of this encoded message. So there's two aspects of it. First of all, there's the obvious one, which is that it's a condemnation of the current financial system. That you have bailouts where there's all this threat of collapse of the economy unless we bail out the banks. So if that's true, then it's a flawed system, and I think Satoshi realized that, and that's one of the things that that caused him to want to create Bitcoin. And the second thing is something that most people don't even think about, is that by time stamping, by giving a proof of date, by putting the headline on there, he also proved that he didn't pre-mine it. So, but this is back in 2009. Back then, nobody even knew what pre-mine was or what pre-mine meant. But in order to give legitimacy to this coin, he wanted to show that he wasn't mining it ahead of time. And the way he did it was by timestamping it with the headline. Now, this is crazy that he knew to do this without having an example to look back on. I think that this is a kind of a cool thing, that it's also acts as a proof of no pre-mine. And a lot of shitcoins that are launched are pre-mined. Not all of them, most of them. I think there's a few rare exceptions, but for the most part, any shitcoin that's launched is pre-mined, and that's why it's a big scam. And that's another reason why Bitcoin isn't a scam. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention, something that I've discussed before in a previous video, which is that there was a Liberty dollar before Bitcoin, which was a private currency, which was a centralized private currency. And the Liberty dollar offices were raided about a year before the Satoshi white paper came out. And I think that raid definitely influenced Satoshi, because the white paper came out about a year later, and Satoshi was anonymous. He remained anonymous. He launched this paper anonymously, remained anonymous throughout the development of Bitcoin, and then disappeared. So why would he do that? Why would he stay anonymous? Well, I think because about a year before he released the white paper, some doors were kicked down in the offices of Liberty Dollar, and people were arrested. Now, I know Michelle Seven gave me crap for not naming the person who was busted for running Liberty Dollar. So maybe I should look that person up right now. It was Bernard van NotHaus. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but that was the guy who was behind Liberty Dollar, and that was the guy that was busted by the feds about a year before the Satoshi white paper came out. Okay, you happy, Michelle? I mentioned his name now. Okay, but again, love the feedback. Appreciate the feedback, not just from Michelle, but from everybody. So there was that he had the prescience to remain anonymous, after what happened with Liberty Dollar. And then one of the last known posts that Satoshi made before he disappeared. I don't know if this was exactly the last one or it was one of the last ones. Was on a forum, and the post was dated December 11th of 2010, and it read. It was regarding the WikiLeaks had just announced the credit card companies had shut down and PayPal had shut down donations to WikiLeaks. So WikiLeaks had just said that they were going to accept Bitcoin for donations. And this is what Satoshi said about that. It would have been nice to get this attention in any other context. WikiLeaks has kicked the hornet's nest, and the swarm is headed towards us. So Satoshi disappeared soon after this post, or right immediately after this post. So Satoshi understood that in order for Bitcoin to succeed, it had to be left alone by the authorities for a number of years for it to develop on its own, until it became basically unshutdownable, for lack of a better word. The governments, they can't really shut down Bitcoin now, or they can't in any practical way shut down Bitcoin. But in the early stages, Bitcoin could have been shut down because there was only like half a dozen people that were involved, and the government could have stopped it right away. But Satoshi understood that Bitcoin needed to be left alone and kind of fly under the radar for a number of years for it to take off, and he disappeared soon after this. He didn't want the heat. He understood that heat was coming, and if he had hung around and kept on making posts, at some point his identity would have been discovered. So he was smart enough to disappear at the time that he did. And then another thing that I want to talk about is the fact that his vast wealth of early Bitcoins that he mined, back when he and a few other people were the only ones mining. And I remember this article I read back in 2014, and I had to look it up again. So this is an article that's dated June 22nd of 2014. I'm going to link to this article and a couple of the other things that I've been talking about today. So by all means, check them out for yourself. But this article from June 22nd of 2014 from letstalkbitcoin.com. And it says Rise of the Zombie Bitcoins. I remember reading this back when it came out, and I looked it up again. It's a very, very intriguing, interesting article. It talks about quote-unquote zombie coins that haven't been touched for a number of years, and no one knows for sure whether these coins are dead, whether they're lost, or if the owners just haven't moved them. So that's kind of a very, very cool read. Now, this article covers a number of things. It covers it covers a lot of this FUD that you hear around Bitcoin, where they say, a vast majority of the Bitcoins are in the hands of a few people, and this article kind of exposes that, because it says they're miscounting it. What they're counting is a lot of these dust wallets. So you can read that for yourself. I may do a complete video on that at some point. But the dust are not really any actual funds. These are just kind of dust, little bits and pieces of tiny pieces of Bitcoins that have been left behind from other transactions. But the more interesting part of the article, in my opinion, is this idea that Satoshi has access to all these coins, or he did at one point, and he has never moved them. And because he's never touched them, that has actually given Bitcoin more legitimacy and more value. And if these coins were ever moved, so if Satoshi is still around and he still has access to these coins, if he hasn't lost his key, and he starts moving these Bitcoins around, The article, I believe, says that it could cause a panic in Bitcoin. It could cause a drop in price, or it'll cause all sorts of alarm bells to go off in Bitcoin, because these coins that were thought to have been, basically frozen and gone forever are now all of a sudden starting to move again. And it's kind of a cool thing that Satoshi hasn't touched them, and he's stayed disappeared, and he hasn't really come forward and said anything. Even back in 2017, when there were all sorts of arguments going back and forth about how Bitcoin should scale, what the future of Bitcoin should be, Satoshi stayed quiet, didn't speak up, didn't come back, because if he had done so, it would have been like he was the leader. He knew that he had to stay hands off and let this develop, and let this fight, this Bitcoin civil war that was going on in 2017, develop on its own. He knew that he couldn't step forward, or at least this is what I think. He couldn't step forward and say, oh, this is what I agree with. This is the side I agree with. Because then the argument would have basically been over. And he would have been basically the king of Bitcoin. But because he stayed quiet, if he's still alive, and didn't speak up, it kind of allowed Bitcoin to go through this little growing pain of the Bitcoin wars and forks of 2017. And I think it emerged far, far more stronger because of it. Instead of had Satoshi kind of chimed in with his opinion and said, no, this is what I think should happen. And the cool thing about Bitcoin is that, and I've seen somebody tweet this. I don't remember who it was. It may have been Brave the World, where she said that the cool thing about Bitcoin, or something, it's a paraphrase, but she said something like, the cool thing about Bitcoin isn't that it survived its enemies, it's that it survived its friends. And I think that's what happened in 2017. And Satoshi never spoke up, never said anything during all those wars and all those fights, and just kind of stayed out of it and let it work itself out. And I think that was another cool, prescient thing that Satoshi did. So that's all I have for today. What do you guys think? Do you guys have any other opinions about Satoshi and the cool things that Satoshi did? I'm sure there's tons of stuff I'm leaving out. So if you know of anything else that Satoshi did that was very, very prescient and very, very forward looking and genius, please let me know in the comments, and like or dislike this video. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to keep seeing more content like this. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Bitcoin Motorist on Twitter. And if you're watching this on Facebook, click on over to my YouTube channel and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to keep seeing these, because I may not keep posting them on Facebook. All right, with that, you guys have an awesome night. Thank you. Bye.